you got arguments on both sides. I don't know. I tend to, the way I approach government is sort of play the cards that I'm dealt in terms of structure. And then how do you operate inside that structure? And the only little piece of my history, in Mississippi, we were one of the last states to go from a single 4-year term for governor to allowing a governor to run for re-election. Now, some people say that the single 4-year term is better. Some people say that it's been better since then. But I do know that whether it's one term or two, the main topic of conversation at the governor's inaugural is who's running the next time. Let me see. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. My name is Lafayette Davis. I'm a student at Naval War College. I have a question. Talks about the future of the Navy. Given the decreasing demographics of our European alliances, France, Germany, Italy, as you know, they actually not having enough population to replace themselves. And Japanese have a major problem with that. Their birth rate is far lower than their death rate. And given the demographics for India and China, with their abundance of males, how do you see our security, I guess our naval security framework in Europe as well as in the Pacific? If we have a lack of manpower, and given the Athenians lost a war, the British suffered greatly in World War I, World War II, and because they were maritime powers, their power base and their ability to project power definitely decreased and had an impact.
Number one, I can see why you're a student here. I mean, it's a great question. Number two, I'm going to give pretty close to the same answer I just gave. I don't know. I do know that we are stronger together with our allies than we are by ourselves. I do know that things like having a Spanish frigate with the George W. Bush strike group makes that a better strike group. I know that operating with our allies, like the Japanese, like Europeans, like allies all around the world, makes us better. In terms of big population changes, I don't know. I do know that things like that, things like climate change, are going to have profound maritime consequences. As sea levels rise, some of the biggest levels of instability are going to be along the coast because some of our most impoverished countries are along the coast. And if there is a response, it will be a maritime response. And so our challenge will get bigger. I know that as the polar ice cap melts and as you look toward an ice-free northern route, at least in the summertime, within the next 2 or 3 decades, our maritime responsibilities are going to have to change. How you deal with the bigger population issues, I don't know. But I do know that it's something you have to take into account as you go forward. Who are our friends? What capacities do they bring? And what do we have to do on our own? Last thing I'll say is that we are the preeminent naval power in the world. And there's one big difference. There have been other preeminent naval powers. But our difference is we have used that power to keep the sea lanes open and the maritime commons open for everybody, and not just our ships. And that's different. And that's why I think it's so important that we continue to be that global fleet and that global power. All right, I got time, I think, for one more. And I haven't taken, I apologize, but I haven't taken anybody from over here. So I'll do you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Fred Kobrick, Sudbury, Mass. I have a question about ships. We've had a very unpredictable world. The major events have not been predicted. We've had, expensive destroyers that cost as much as carriers used to cost. So the question is, I'm sure you want to be in the Navy proactive, not reactive. But who decides what kind of ships we're going to need, because they take a long time to plan, design, and build? How much of that is coming from the private sector that wants to build certain kinds of ships? How much are different interests pushing certain things? Or how much strategic planning do you and your senior colleagues have control over? How in this uncertain world are we going to plan what ships we really need?
Well, Title 10 of the United States Code gives me the responsibility for equipping the United States Navy. And I take that responsibility pretty seriously in terms of what ships we buy, what types of ships we buy. Some of the things I've said before, the need to build ships that we know how to build. The first ship of a class is incredibly expensive. The more ships that are built, the price ought to and usually does go down. Second is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you've got an 80% solution, use it. Don't try to get that last 20%. If technology changes in the middle while you're building a ship, put it on the next ship. Don't stop in the middle. I think we owe industry basically three things. One is stable designs. Don't design the ship while you're building it. Second, you smile, but we've done that more than we should have. Secondly is mature technology. Don't start building the ship and say, well, the technology isn't quite there yet, but we'll get there before the ship is. And third, be transparent in terms of what kinds, how many, and when ships are going to be built. Now, in return, I think industry owes us something. One is that they will make the investments in infrastructure and training that they're going to need to build these ships. Number two, that every single ship of a class that you build, you ought to have a learning curve. And so the price ought to go down, the man hours ought to go down. Finally, the types of ships we build have just got to be flexible. The LCS is a good example. It's got 3 different weapon systems right now. You pull it into the pier, you take one off, you put another one on. You don't change the hull. You change the weapon system. Technology is going to change. All we got to do is change the weapon system. We don't have to go build a whole new ship. But in terms of the strategy of what ships we build, when we build them, Congress has the ultimate control of that with the power of the purse. But in terms of what is recommended, in terms of what is what we're going to buy, it's me and the CNO and the senior leadership of the Department of the Navy. It goes that direction, not the other. All right. I wish I could stay longer. I have been away from Washington, away from the Pentagon, which is not altogether a bad thing, for about 10 days. And more importantly, I've been away from my family and my 10-year-old for equal amount of time. And so I'm going to head back to D.C. We started this trip out in New England a week ago Sunday when I named CVN 79 the next nuclear carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy, which and I think it's very fitting that it gets bracketed by that and by this, because as I said in my talk, this institution, the thoughts that come out of it, the people that come out of it, absolutely crucial to the future not only of the Navy and Marine Corps, but of the United States. Thank y'all. Thank you, sir.